Hello, Dr. Gundry. If beans are so bad, how come they are a common food in the blue zone populations? Oh, this is my favorite myth of the blue zones. It's really one of the great myths. So, the bean theory of the blue zones is unfortunately not compatible with the facts.
The Longevity Paradox. Stay tuned, we've got some important health news to cover here. What if beans are a myth of the blue zones? With the new Gundry MD book, The Longevity Paradox, coming soon, let's have a listen to these new revelations from Dr. Gundry about the longest lived people in the blue zones. And once you understand what he's saying about each population, you'll be able to determine, based on the evidence, whether or not the bean theory of the blue zones has been debunked by Dr. Gundry. But before we give the stage back to Dr. Gundry, let's take a moment to tweet at Dan Beuttner, the author of the Blue Zones, and let him know that the bean theory of the blue zones has been debunked. Make sure to hit subscribe while we're waiting for him to respond. Now, let's clear the air with a reminder that the blue zones is not the only research that indicates eating beans and legumes is one of the most important dietary predictors of longevity. That being said, are you aware statistics show white Americans are eating the most pitiful amount of beans per person per year? To my Hispanic friends, y'all are doing better with beans. But listen up, white people. It's very likely that beans barely make up a fraction of a single percentage of your total daily calorie intake when averaged out over a year, unless you're currently making a conscious effort to eat beans every day. Now, let's throw the ball back to Dr. Gundry.
So, are the blue zones actually eating beans? Well, let's start with Okinawan. The Okinawan Diet was studied in 1949 by the U.S. military. And in fact, the Okinawan Diet was 85% purple sweet potatoes. 85% of what they ate was a sweet potato. 6% of their diet was white rice.
Wow, y'all, that's a lot of sweet potatoes and white rice. This is pretty serious. I mean, that's a lot of complex carbohydrates. You know, starch. So their diet was about 90% starch. And they lived really long, healthy lives? What percentage of the Gundry diet is starch? No rice on the Gundry diet, no potatoes, no pasta, no bread, and sweet potatoes on the Gundry diet are listed as only in moderation. Dr. Gundry, why should sweet potatoes only be eaten in moderation? Would eating too many sweet potatoes make us unhealthy? You see what I did there? Now watch carefully as he tries to cleverly downplay the role of beans in the Okinawan diet.
And 6% of their diet was soy that was miso. It was fermented soy. They didn't eat tofu. They didn't eat brown rice. So 85% of a blue zone diet had nothing to do with beans.
Keep watching, because this is about to get good. If we expand our frame of reference for a moment, we can draw from the food habits in later life study and look at the Japanese cohort. Now granted, the Okinawans were a unique population with distinctions from the mainland Japanese. But Japanese longevity is also quite remarkable in a number of ways. The Japanese in this study were eating 85 grams of beans or legumes per day, which amounts to more than 65 pounds per person per year if you total it up. Remember from earlier, that's about 12 times more beans than the fiber-deficient white people in America are eating, where the laxative industry is over $1 billion per year. So the Okinawans ate a starch-based diet with 6% of calories from beans, which appears to be significantly more than the amount eaten by white Americans who think carbs make you fat. But remember, Dr. Gundry doesn't recommend a starch-based diet. Dr. Gundry recommends a high-fat diet.
In fact, I believe you should make it a goal to eat 12 tablespoons of olive oil a day for optimal health. Yes, that's around 1,400 calories per day of olive oil.
Now, let's go back to the Blue Zones so Dr. Gundry can school us on Loma Linda, which is where he was located for the majority of his career.
Let's talk about Loma Linda. Loma Linda uses a form of soybeans that's called texturized vegetable protein, TVP. It's defatted soy that is pressure extruded under high heat. The Adventists don't use beans. They use pressure and heat pressurized beans, which is exactly what I tell you to do. If you want to eat beans, and I have nothing against beans as long as you detoxify their lectins by pressure cooking. And remember, even when prepared correctly, beans and nightshades shouldn't be a huge part of your everyday diet.
So he says he has nothing against beans, but he just doesn't want you to eat them as a regular part of your diet, even if you prepare them the way he recommends. In my opinion, that's pretty shady. Don't you think he might be confusing people with conflicting health advice in an effort to deter them from eating a sensible diet based around starches and legumes? Well, we're not done yet. What about the Sardinian Blue Zone?
So if you look at other cultures, for instance, the Greeks, the Sardinians actually don't eat a whole lot of beans. The Greeks definitely do.
Okay, so this is the part where I have to say, citation needed. Dan Beuttner, if you're watching this, what do you think about that statement regarding the Sardinians? I mean, I got a copy of the Blue Zones right here, and it says, the Sardinian diet was lean and largely plant-based with an emphasis on beans, whole wheat, and garden vegetables. So, is Dan Beuttner wrong? Nah. Dr. Gundry said they don't eat a whole lot of beans. What is that? What's a whole lot, huh? Because you were downplaying the Okinawans at 6% of total calories, and the data I showed earlier from the Food Habits in Later Life study showed that the mainland Japanese were eating way more than 10 times the amount of beans white Americans are eating by weight per person per year. So what's a whole lot? And what's your citation?
But the work that was done in Food and Western Disease actually shows that the beans and the grains in the Mediterranean diet are a negative factor.
You could spend all day looking for food and Western diseases in PubMed and come up empty-handed because that's not a study. It's a low-carb book written in 2009 at the height of the paleo diet fad. The guy who wrote it, Staffan Lindberg, believed in the so-called ancestral diet, or paleo diet, or evolutionary nutrition, whatever you want to call it. It looks like he was one of the few paleo proponents who thought eating less meat and more plant food was entirely consistent with evolution, as long as you exclude grains and beans. Does that sound familiar? Sounds a lot like the way Dr. Gundry was branding his diet advice back in 2008. Next. Back to Lindbergh. He died at 66 years old of pancreatic cancer. Meanwhile, Ancel Keys, who introduced the concept of the Mediterranean diet to North Americans and tried to warn an entire generation about saturated fat from animal products, lived to be 100 years old. And didn't he write a book about beans? The Benevolent Bean by Ancel Keys. What do you know? Benevolent means good. Beans are good. Beans are good for you. They don't cost a lot of money. They are a great source of protein and fiber, and they keep you full.
So, the bean theory of the blue zones is unfortunately not compatible with the facts.
Are you going to rationalize Dr. Gundry's diminished portrayal of the importance of beans in the blue zones as a dietary factor that leads to longevity? Nah. Especially considering several randomized control trials demonstrate that beans absolutely significantly lower cholesterol, which may reduce your risk for heart disease. And there's even research indicating diets without beans are associated with an increased risk of death from all causes. So what do y'all think? Are beans a myth of the blue zones? Or do beans play a novel and important dietary role in creating long-term health in a variety of different populations across the world? Are y'all going to pick up a copy of Dr. Gundry's new book, The Longevity Paradox, when it comes out? At the end of this video, I'll put a link to the entire Dr. Gundry playlist so you can learn more. Make sure to hit subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss any videos like this one. Red Pill Vegan, next.